Okay, it looks like we have most of the people logging on here already joined, so that's great. So let's get this kicked off. Well, thank you everyone for taking time this afternoon to join our webinar, which is titled CMDB Health Check, Leveraging the CMDB for Business Success. Welcome. My name is Noel Daniel, and I'm an account executive with Covestic. I'm also joined today by my colleague Scott Trumbull, who's a senior solutions architect. Scott and I will be discussing the importance of a healthy CMDB and the value that a well-defined and maintained CMDB brings to an organization when trying to prioritize the support of business-critical services. Today's webinar will focus on four main areas. We'll determine the health of your CMDB, quick wins to improve your CMDB, optimize your CMDB, and then leverage ServiceNow's native tools for maintaining a healthy CMDB. There will be an opportunity later to ask questions via the chat feature, and we'll have some time towards the end to answer as many questions as time permits. The webinar is recorded, and so we'll send a link to everyone attending, so keep an eye out for that email. So a little bit about Covestic. We are proud to say that we're an elite partner with ServiceNow, both in sales and services. We were founded in 2001 and headquartered in Kirkland, Washington, but we do deliver services nationwide. We have over 250 senior level consultants, and again, there is over 15 years of average professional and consulting services experience. We have deployed over 180 implementations, and we're proud to say that we have a CSAT score of 9.7. And that's fundamentally because of our deep ServiceNow platform expertise and specialized practice areas with laser focus. As a result of that, we have over 90% of our customers that come back for repeat business. And that's awesome when we think about, the number of projects that we take on here. And because we have a people and process first approach to business, our clients love us. The way we interact with them, listen to them, understand them, and help them get to what their implementation goals are. So as I said, our expertise is organized into practice areas, and we have three of them. Firstly, we have the service management consulting practice, which is focused around assessing, defining, and implementing optimized service management solutions. ServiceNow is our only service management solution partnership, by the way. So we focus on that. Our IT operations managed services practice, which focuses around developing, standardizing, and operating IT operations, which are cloud and enterprise infrastructure, security operations, applications administration, and operations build and run. Project delivery services practices, which focus around providing project leadership management to deliver complex IT projects, compliance, staffing, quality, and timing of projects and deliverables aligned with your lifetime practices. Here is a quick snapshot of some of our clients. We're doing large-scale engagements where we're managing our customers' IT practices. Some examples of our large-scale enterprise managed services clients include Microsoft, T-Mobile, and Xbox. At this time, I'd like to introduce Scott Trumbull. Scott, good afternoon to you, sir. Would you kindly introduce yourself and take us through today's webinar, please?
Hey, good afternoon, Noel. I hope everybody can hear me all right. So my name is Scott Trumbull. I'm one of the senior solution architects here at Covestic. For myself, I've 30 plus years in the IT industry and software development and things like that. For about the last 8 years, I've been pretty much working exclusively in the ServiceNow, or I have been working exclusively in the ServiceNow environment. After my first implementation as architect, I like the cool tools, saw the potential, and have stuck with it ever since. I carry a number of ServiceNow certifications as well as an instructor. Some folks may know me from either projects or from speaking at Knowledge or CreatorCon. I would say my claim to fame in the ServiceNow world is as the builder and programmer of the beer bot that was, it's a ServiceNow ServiceNow controlled beer delivering robot that was in the inaugural CreatorCon of 2015. But anyway, that's more than enough about me. We're really here today to talk about CMDB and a healthy CMDB. And I really want to call out, before I jump too much into the topic, a big thank you to Noel and to our marketing help from Caitlin, who when I brought this up, and Caitlin, who's here helping put this together for us on her birthday. So I can't thank her enough. And Noel, I brought this up as a topic, as something I'm passionate about, and they kind of rally behind me and to help put this together as a webinar to share with people out there. As we talked about, Noel brought up, we're going to talk about the importance of CMDB for your business success. And we're really going to dive into, and one of the things you're going to hear me, for lack of a better term, harp on in the next 30 minutes or so, is the CMDB key performance indicators. Coming across with that idea that CMDB Health is something quantifiable. We'll talk about, what is a CMDB Health Check? Why would you do it? What's the purpose of that? And then how do we get from there to leveraging those ServiceNow health monitoring features? Getting to health tech, making sure we're monitoring back to those things I talked about, those KPIs, and taking advantage of that. And then lastly, making sure we follow up on that and take action on our health check results. I'm not going to dive or spend a whole lot of time in this. Everybody out here's on here today because they recognize the value of the CMDB. We can talk about how much downtime is caused by technology, by people by change, not knowing the impact of changes, not knowing the thing, what poor data quality, how time's lost by people trying to do root cause analysis, trying to deal with things and tracking to the wrong component before they find what the root is. These are not new statistics. They're on here. You'll see it. You'll get it. I'm assuming we're here because we know about it. So the use of the CMDB, we know how important that is. We know how important it is to our organization. But the biggest thing I want to talk about too is, we talk about not knowing what CI is causing an outage, or that escalating to the wrong service and support team, or events not correlated to the correct CI. But the bigger thing, and where my passion in this comes from, is those amount of times that I'm involved in other, like particularly ITOM related, and I do a lot of ITOM related orchestration, service mapping, that type of work, event management, and how many of those initiatives are failing, or if not failing, they're really having to do some sort of CMDB remediation effort up front because they're dependent. Those things, the dependency of and the abilities of companies to implement things like event management and service mapping and GRC.
Yeah, there's some great insights there, Scott. And listening to your introduction there, it occurred to me that folks in our audience today might be a mixed bag. Some might be just now considering implementing a CMDB, and then others may have started that journey and have stalled for some reason, and yet others may have a functional CMDB and are looking to mature their processes. So regardless of where they are in their journey, Scott, would you talk to us about the importance of having a healthy CMDB and how IT might benefit from having such a highly effective tool when supporting the business?
Yeah, so that's a big thing. It's not just about supporting the business. It's about getting the most. If you're already a ServiceNow user, it's about getting the most out of the tool, leveraging as many features as we can in that tool. And this quote here is right out of the ServiceNow documentation. I call it up, that maintaining And monitoring and maintaining the health of the CMDB is essential to the effective and continuous use of the product, right? So ServiceNow's recognized this. They've put a ton of effort, invested a lot of money in the product, into growing the product and adding new features for monitoring the CMDB, for adding those health indicators, such as required fields, duplicated CIs, flowing those up to scorecards and dashboards that are viewable and usable for people. So it's about getting the most out of the product and monitoring it. It's not just about getting the data in there. It's about putting the tools and the processes in place to make sure that we're getting that data is staying clean and staying useful. So that kind of brings us into why we want to perform, or what value you might get from a CMDB Health Check. And that's maintaining that your CMDB is populated with reliable data. It's populated with data that people trust, and giving visibility to the quality of the data that's in there. So, we're going to get to a health check. We want to be in a place where we're confident in the data, our people are confident in the data, and we can use the data so we can leverage the rest of the tool. Is this data valued and trusted? Is this data ready to support our roadmap? Performing the health check gives you that measure where I talked about, again, that measurable quantity, defining how to measure the quality of our CMDB, knowing where we're at, applying those KPIs so we can track it going forward.
Yeah, you're so right there, Scott. When I speak to some folks about the CMDB, people take a short-term view and look at the CMDB from just an asset management perspective. A collection of discovered CIs, and that in some way helps to resolve break-fix issues. As you know, the CMDB is much more than that, and the true value comes from being able to monitor the health of the business critical services for the organization, and when those are impacted, the right people are notified and the issues investigated and remediated quickly with little to no business impact. And frankly, when that happens, IT is viewed as a true business partner rather than a cost center. So, with that in mind, how do we leverage ServiceNow's advanced platform capabilities, such as the automation and the orchestration piece in support of, enhancing the CMDB and bringing that real business value to IT?
And that's a piece that I imagine people on here are pretty much aware of that. For the most part, the ServiceNow platform revolves around the CMDB underneath. Revolves around the entire ServiceNow platform, revolves around that. Whether we're doing IT service management, it's real easy to see and understand where the connection is between, incident, problem, change, those type of things. But, when we want to get beyond that, when we want to get the real value of the tool and move into that IT business management areas, the governance, risk, and compliance, and particularly in SecOps, moving into security operations. Those customer engagements for that, like I said before, the amount of times they're delayed for CMDB remediation tasks. So it's not just about leveraging it for those ITSM solutions. It's getting the strength, getting the value out of the whole platform for all the things going on in there. And the other thing that people find in that why to perform CMDB Health Check, and that's environments are changing. Our environments are constantly evolving in IT, right? We have things going on. Just 5 years ago, most people would not have guessed the amount of virtualization they might have in their environments today, and is growing every day. So if you've implemented a number of years ago, your sources might have changed, how you deal with those things might change, the types of software you use, the type of operating systems you use, how those things are hosted either on or off site of your areas, and how those are leveraged. A lot of that has changed and continues to change over time. And the other factors that go into making that change. Companies are changing, their workforce is changing, people come, people go, how people work are changed. The amount of people now dealing with maybe mobile devices or bring your own devices, or people that work remotely, companies taking on, merging, selling, adding new things, all these affect, it's all this drift over time in the CMDB. So what we get to there for the health check is we really want to be able to measurably demonstrate the value to the organization, show the CMDB value to the users. If it isn't trusted, it isn't used. If it isn't trusted, it isn't used, and it's self-perpetuating. If it isn't used, the data gets worse. The data gets worse, it diminishes over time. People find ways around it. They find other ways to get their job done. We're not in a position to leverage those other pieces of the project. When we go into CMDB Health Check, we want to demonstrate that value. And it's about being transparent to what the current state is, what the actionable plans are to remediate any issues with this, right? The health check kind of defines what's going to be present in our CMDB, where we at versus where we want to be, and how are we going to maintain it. And brought up again, it's so hard to tackle things like SecOps and GRC and event management without a good CMDB underpinning it. And so we want to get to a point where we can, in a very clear, a very concise way, know what is the accuracy of our data. How do we quantify the accuracy of that data? How do we do it? What are our gaps? How do we fill those gaps? And that goes back to, I kind of brought that up before, where that every organization that has their naysayers, because they don't have faith in that data, they're going to say, I can't use ServiceNow, or me or my team have to work from these spreadsheets. And some of their concerns may be very real. So what we want to get is be able to, a health check, is be able to know what those concerns are, address what those concerns, set up our health rules and our dashboards to provide proactive feedback on that, assign tasks people can work on, and start removing those reasons, or identify how to fix those reasons going forward. So, oh, sorry, Noel?
No, Scott, that's an interesting point. I was thinking here, some of the common inhibitors that you mentioned, like having a well-maintained, like the naysayers and the lack of governance, for example, that typically inhibit, a well-maintained CMDB, So how do, you go about performing a CMDB health check, and what steps, might you want to follow?
Yeah, so that's what, and let's start getting into that. What is a health check and what happens? And I imagine that's what a lot of people are here to kind of maybe try and learn a little bit more. What are the steps in that health check? What brings it up? And the big thing for us, and for us at Covestic, when I'm working with people to do this, is it's a combination of a technical and process approach. And I want to understand that it's not just a technical question. It's not just, what's the quality of my data in there? How's in there? What's filled in? What's not filled in? It's not just that. So keeping that in mind, you would come in first, and while you're doing that, the first thing you're going to do is review that CMDB implementation. Do the classes and the class attributes in the CMDB, do they support your business processes? Do we know all the things do we know about all the things in our environment that we need to know? Do we have all of the CIs we need to have, and that's looking at the data, kind of reviewing the data and seeing what's in there, seeing what's missing, seeing what's garbage data, what's valuable, and reviewing those sources of the data. Are all the sources, are all the places, are you just running discovery? Are you doing a combination of discovery? Or is this all people manually entering? Are we working with various third-party tools, the SCCMs, the Flexeras, those type of things? Where's my data coming from? Is where that data is coming from still valid? Are there additional sources of data that we maybe haven't implemented? What's really out there in our environment? And again, where it said it's not just a technical approach. It's a process of approach, and it's reviewing those process, going through what are the roles and responsibilities of people in your environment related to your CMDB. Who are those CMDB owners? Who are those people? You know, we're going to talk about. We want to literally look at, identify who are those CMDB owners for that class. Who defines what correct looks like for that class? Who defines what a correct CI is for that class? And who has responsibility to fix it? Who can go in and make CMDB updates? Why would they make updates? Who can do it? What can they do it? Or what other systems would make updates? And then going back in again and analyzing that CMDB data for those completeness, correctness, the compliance relationships. So knowing, going in, and that's where we're going to kind of dive into the meat of it, where you're going to start using your help board, developing those KPIs around completeness, correctness, compliance. You know, once we've defined it, what's out there, what's outside of it. And the last thing that comes out of this should really be, if your organization doesn't have CMDB process guides, it would be creating them, and those are living, breathing documents. That's where you're capturing the organization, and within your organization, who's responsible for what, where does it come from, who can fill it, who owns it, how do we get it. So if you don't have them, it's creating them, incorporating them into your ITSM processes and your standards, or updating them while they're there. It's a living thing. It should grow as your organization grows and changes.
Yeah, that's a very good point right there about the process guides, Scott. You know, when implementing a CMDB, people tend to approach it, you know, it's just from that, you know, capture the technical information about the CIs, normalize the data, you know, maybe match or join the data with other data, and then load it into the CMDB. The problem with that kind of approach is that every time the CMDB gets, you know, that happens, the CMDB gets, you know, messy and full of inaccurate and inefficient data. So what are some of the best practices that we could consider when implementing a CMDB?
Yeah, no, and that kind of drives right into you know, what I like to call the common or normal practice, and kind of viewing around maybe what somebody implementing ServiceNow. Again, I go back, you know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, or maybe some people, unfortunately, even recently, how they might go about their implementation versus how we go about implementing CMDB now, and how we work with clients, or a lot of people work with clients, how ServiceNow's methodology for dealing with the CMDB now. And then also, so that's where the health check comes in. A lot of times it's that choice, that opportunity to take a break, where maybe you haven't implemented these features, to take a pause and get to where you're in there now, to get them implemented and have them going forward. You know, populating the CMDB used to be just that ETL, extract, transform, and load. And all the data from all the sources, whether people are rushed to get off of a tool, or they don't know it, or they have spreadsheets they're loading in, it all became, you know, getting all that data initially loaded into ServiceNow and brought into ServiceNow, just get it in there and then try and figure out what's going on. And so you have data coming in from various sources. Now once it's in there, people are trying to do some analysis between maybe a load and their go live, to do some analysis of where are we missing key data, where are things overlapping, what problems, what gaps might there be, and sometimes that really causes some things to either go in with some lack of confidence, or some lack of confidence to develop pretty soon, pretty quickly along the way. Whereas, as kind of now, our approach for this is to define what good looks like, define what a correct CI is in that organization. And ServiceNow has a lot of these rules turned on out of the box for kind of the common scenarios, the common cases. So we go in kind of developing and turning on those health rules, turning on those identification rules, those attributes rules out of the box. And then as data is loaded initially, right from the start, working against that dashboard, working against those KPIs to see where our gaps are, where our problem areas, where potential duplicates lie, and leveraging those tools right from the beginning to define what looks good, what looks correct, and identifying issues right from the start. And again, that kind of comes back to a lot of the health check is kind of getting to a point where we're leveraging those tools.
Yeah, Scott, I'm sure lots of people here definitely want to undertake such a project, but it's hard to step away from your day-to-day operations to manage and maintain a CMDB. People just, busy keeping the lights on for the most part. And so, I think this is an area where, if somebody's struggling with their CMDB, for instance, they should really look to engage with a partner like Covestic, and get some help. We have undertaken many successful CMDB projects, and there's a wealth of real-world experience that we can, they can tap into, that we can bring. We can get into the heart of the business issues because we stay focused on the CMDB project, and frankly, we have the ability to see the forest through the trees. And having the subject matter expertise means that a partner can help organize and realize business value much quicker, I think. So I certainly would urge people to consider using an experienced partner to help leverage the CMDB for business success. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so that's a great call, Nolan. That's, it is hard. People implement, and then everybody's busy just keeping the lights on. So there's two things going on there. One, that ability to kind of step away back from your regular day-to-day operations of keeping the lights on, to work with that, and to work and kind of maybe re-interview or identify or do data analysis to work at what the problem is. And then there's the other thing of just keeping up with the tool. ServiceNow is implementing features fast and furiously, and particularly a lot around CMDB Health. So, the ability to take time out of your job, out of your day-to-day life, very few people, and most organizations are dedicated ServiceNow administrators. A lot of organizations, the people that are doing this are sharing job responsibilities in other areas, just keeping up with what's available in the tool, that sometimes there's maybe a little need to bring in a little help in that area. So we kind of talk about now, it's all about measuring CMDB Health, and that's, CMDB Health can be quantified, right? It's all about measuring the health, coming in with some ways to identify, to dashboard, be transparent, and report, right? And we mentioned earlier, we started with the quote at the beginning that ServiceNow recognizes the importance. They recognize how difficult it is to maintain and the importance. And ever since, like I mentioned before, ever since I believe it really started to grow, these things really started to be useful around Helsinki, I think, and the current release, the new deduplication wizard in London is a fantastic tool that can leverage right from these tasks. But how much we can get from these dashboards, the CMDB Health dashboard in ServiceNow, the class manager, being able to set up desired state certifications, and again, those health KPIs, those key performance indicators of the health, to see it on the screen that everybody can access in your organization, from the top down, to be transparent, to be able to drill into, not only can I say these CIs are missing, or there are 40 CIs in a class missing information, I can drill right in and say, these are the 40 CIs that are missing information, and this is the piece of information we expect it to have that it doesn't. And that's all from that health dashboard. And if you're not using it, you should be. So it allows us to measure those CIs, measure our CMDB for completeness. CIs, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this here and this tool, and because I'm bringing it up so much because I get a compassion the amount of people that I walk into their organization and they aren't leveraging recommended fields. So ServiceNow has created that ability through the CI class manager to define on CI's recommended fields, right? So there was a time if I was implementing this and I said, well, if I have a Windows server, I need to know these things about those servers. So my implementer or my person is going to go in and make those fields on the server record be required. So in practice, what happens? They might be fields, somebody might be creating that server, they might be standing it up, there might be things that aren't discoverable, or there might be things that they just don't know yet. So I've stood up a server, there's stuff about it, there's fields on it that I don't know the answer to yet. I don't know who the support team's going to be for it. Maybe I don't know what domain. I don't know what domain it's going to be, and it could be anything. It's usually those. Might be that support team, might be the owner, might be what it's used for, might be the relationships. Got to put it on there. So I have a choice because it's set a recommended field. I have two choices. I can't save this record. I don't know that. I either type in ZXCDBDN and hit enter. Or I say, oh, well, I'm going to come back to this later, and that never happens. So you have those two choices. Neither one of them is good. And both of them perpetuate to getting bad information in our CMDB, and they just grow. Now, if I define a recommended field, that CI is usable. I can save it. It's in there. Maybe I'm going to say my support group and my location and things are all recommended fields. I expect you to have them in there. I can save it. I have the information, or it comes in from my source. It doesn't have it. It can still create it in there. But now it's going to show up on my dashboard, and I'm going to see in those completeness records the amount of things that are slipping, the amount of things that don't have all those fields filled in. And I can go as far as even driving into creating tasks, using those rules to create tasks for people to go in and fix this data. So got a little bit, I'm just excited about that. I think it's really valuable, that completeness. And if people come away and can go back and look at how they do that in their organization, I think they can start seeing their quality going up. Moving on to that, we can go for correctness. We can define our correctness in our CIs. And again, these are all pieces pulled right off of the CMDB Health Dashboard. They're right out there. Our correctness is going to help us kind of identify with rules in place those duplicate CIs. So again, identify things that came in that maybe have overlapping names, maybe some features overlapping. I'm going to create potential duplicates. If I'm using this, I'm enabling those jobs. I'm going to show up here on the duplicates. I'm going to create deduplication tasks for somebody to go out and find out what's going on here and remediate this. So in practice, when this is going, somebody's looking at this, they're getting those tasks, they're remediating them when it's 1 or 2. They're not trying to come back later on to say, I have 8,000 of these that I have to deal with. Our orphan rules, that's another thing that I think is really useful, particularly when we have a lot of different sources that are providing things. One of my favorite things to say all the time, that a CMDB without a relationship is just a fancy spreadsheet. We want these relationships. We want to know how one thing ties to another. So by my relationship rules, I can look against, say, my suggested relationships and my relationship rules to say, if there's not a relationship here, something's missing. If I've created a database, if somebody's gone in and created a database record in it, but that database is just existing out in space somewhere. It's not, I might have a relationship rule that says my database needs to say what server it's running on. My website needs to say what web server it's hosted on. And if it doesn't, it's going to start showing up there out here as an orphaned item, that it doesn't have a relationship that it expects between these two things. It's left out there. Or sometimes these come from other scenarios. It might not be putting in the data. It might be that something's been retired out of the system, a piece of it that maybe was hosted on it or connected to it's been moved, but nobody kept up that relationship. The staleness, going in and creating those staleness items in there. So that's gonna determine, particularly if I'm coming in from a discovery source or another third party or something handling these data, that this CI has not been touched in our defined amount of time. I expect it to come in from the source once a month. It's been 3 months. I haven't seen it. Something's stale here. Something's wrong. Somebody needs to go take a look at that. And lastly, we'll talk about our compliance and driving into compliance. And that's looking at your CMDB items, your CMDB classes, individual items against a defined set of rules, a defined set of things within your organization, to make sure how you evaluate against that, to make sure you're fitting in, make sure you're fitting your architecture matches what you expect, that type of thing.
Yeah, so Scott, I know how passionate you are about the subject. You talk about the completeness and correctness, and how is that different to compliance and maybe audit?
Oh, okay, yeah. So an example, the compliance drives from audits that you define in your organization, that are audit rules for you, and they could be extremely complex audit rules, or they could be very simple. So, I believe an example is saying, if I have a Windows server and it's hosting IIS, I might create an architecture audit rule within my organization that says it needs to have this amount of RAM. So if it doesn't have that amount of RAM, or it's going to show up as an architecture compliance, it's going to show up as out of compliant, it doesn't have those things. It could be operational. I might have a rule that says in my organization, my Windows servers that are hosting IIS have to be restarted every 14 days, because that would never be a problem. That we have to restart a Windows server or something like that. So I might have an audit rule that goes out and checks when the last time that machine was started against my data that's, say, coming in from SCCM. And I could show it's out of compliance. Or they could be very complex. Had a really interesting case where an organization was kind of working on a refresh policy and working on refreshing their PCs, and kind of had some expectations of people in different job roles, particularly maybe some high-end development roles, where they wanted to make sure they were getting new hardware at a regular rate. And then sometimes people weren't getting rid of their old hardware. So kind of created some audit rules where they could identify people that had multiple pieces of hardware, and maybe some of that multiple hardware was out of date. So those were some very rather complex scripted audit rules, but we were able to put them in the organization, show them right up there on the dashboard. Their leadership could see, see the number move up and down and drill into it.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's true as these tools kind of evolve, they, make life easier. Many times we've seen tools deployed and, very little attention is paid to them after that. And over time, the CMDB becomes neglected, Scott. So what's your advice on leveraging these newer tools to keep the CMDB fresh and relevant?
Yeah, so that's a big thing. So that kind of comes into, that taking action on our CMDB, taking action on our CMDB Health Check, getting to a point where we have these rules defined, where we know where our gaps are, and we're instituting things within our organization to try to leverage that. And that's a big piece. So, you're going to come out of that health check. You're going to come out of that health check knowing, you want to be, that health check should be a very transparent thing. And I can't express that enough, the two things, transparent. This is where we're at. This is where our problems are. This is what we need to do to fix our problems. This is how we're going to measure our problems. So coming up with a plan to take action on those and check the results. So, and that kind of leads into what I would expect people's takeaway from this to be today. And that's, the CMDB has no value if it isn't trusted, right? If people don't trust the data in the CMDB, they're not going to use it, and the value is going to continue to decrease. The quality is going to decrease because they aren't keeping it up. And that, doing a health check, doing that health check will establish the roadmap to get that CMDB to where it's trusted. So a health check can establish our roadmap to become a trusted CMDB. There's things that might come out of that health check that need to be implemented. So if CMDB doesn't have value, if it's not trusted, a health check lets us know what our problems are, how we get to where it's trusted. And a healthy CMDB is critical to success of unlocking your return on the ServiceNow investment, right? ServiceNow has all these features. We saw that big picture with everything rotating around the CMDB underneath. It's critical to all those things working. ServiceNow tools have evolved. The CMDB and related tools have evolved over time. Ensure that you're using what you know. Use these tools, and I can't, it's not on here, but my takeaway for everybody today, if you hear me say it, you'll hear me say it if you ever talk to me later on about it, CMDB Health is quantifiable, right? Be transparent, identify the strengths and weaknesses, engage a plan to remediate, and define those KPIs, socialize them with each other, but defining those KPIs, implementing them so it's measurable, so everybody can see where your CMDB stands and what needs to be dealt with on it.
Yeah, Scott, it's a big subject here, and I know many people joined here today really with trying to get some help with their projects. As we've seen in today's webinar, the CMDB is, heart of the healthy service management and ServiceNow ecosystem. And, Covestic has been in the service management space for 20 years and a ServiceNow partner for some 9 years now. And in that time, we've seen some common symptoms of a challenged configuration management CMDB posture. For example, the CMDB is either not present or is not being used for common service management functions. They rely on static categorization structures, for example, for incident change, service request assignments and escalations, or incident diagnosis and problem root cause analysis activities are ad hoc and manual. Where the CMDB is present, its contents are not trusted, like you say. Advanced capabilities that unlock the power of the platform, such as the event management piece and the orchestration. You talked about SecOps and GRC. None of them can be fully adopted into the, in the absence of kind of rich and accurate CMDB data. And as a result, ServiceNow ROI is, let's say, suboptimal in the absence of, these advanced capabilities. And so, because of so many organizations struggling with their CMDB projects, Covestic have put together a fixed price CMDB Health Check service offering that will allow organizations to firstly, understand the current state of their CMDB in the context of their overall ServiceNow environment, and then determine the overall ServiceNow roadmap, and how the CMDB plays into that success. And then finally, an action plan to develop the CMDB from a current state to the desired state, and then, if you are interested in conducting a CMDB health check like this, please get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to discuss an action plan for you and to help you set up for long-term ServiceNow success. Okay, so just getting a time check here, and it looks like I want to make sure that I have some time available for getting through some questions. So, Scott, if you don't mind, so let's get to that, and let's get some questions going here. So, let's see. We have quite a few people here that are asking, well, on the subject of creating a lot of custom classes or CI types. They want to know, will they be included in a health job, and will they show up in a CMDB health dashboard?
So the simple answer, Noel, is yes. Yes. So as long as those custom classes, you see my air quote, those custom classes are something that extends from the CMDB CI table, or something somewhere in that CMDB CI class, they can absolutely and will absolutely show up in the dashboard. So out of the box, those rules that you manage through the CI class manager out of the box, ServiceNow kind of provides some basic things, but if you've created a new class, you can go in and create your specific correctness rules, your specific orphan rules, specific staleness rules, those type of things for your class if you want. And if they're different from other areas, like your class is probably created for a reason, it might have some specific fields on it that you might want to make those fields to be a recommended attribute. But otherwise, it's going to go down the chain. So if you don't have any rules on your class, it's going to look at any rules that are applied to the class that it extended from, and leverage those rules.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Scott. And let's pick up another one here. So this is about duplicate CIs. You talked about duplicate CIs, Scott, and after the potential duplicate CIs are identified, will the system fix it, and how?
Yeah, so it is going to use your identification and reconciliation rules to identify CIs, to identify potential duplicates. It's going to create those duplicate tasks and those things underneath it. It's not going to automatically do anything to fix those for you. Those tasks can be assigned to a person. Now, if you I'm going to back up a little bit. So starting in London, I mentioned earlier, there's that deduplication wizard that lets you go from that task and go in and run the wizard, and it'll show you all the values and what's related, what's not. You could pick the parent CI, you can merge them together field by field and choose what you want to come into one CI, and it'll move all of any related tasks out there that are on different CIs over to the one, so everything gets merged together on the other. You could create your own remediation workflow if you have a case where this is what maybe causes my duplicates, this is why it happens and what happens with it. If you develop those workflows, there aren't really any provided for them, but you can develop those duplication workflows, those remediation workflows, and apply them when a duplicate happens.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Let's get through these. There's another question here well, I think we answered it, but we have, how long does a CMDB Health Check take? And it's, I guess it depends on the complexity and how much is the scope of the CMDB, but we kind of went back on that previous slide there with our service offering package. It's a fixed price, implementation service in terms of consulting, etc. So I think that'll probably address that. Let's take one more question here, because I just want to be mindful of the time. It seems the CMDB Health for completeness will report on the state of all required and recommended fields being presented. How are you to determine where these gaps are with those rolled up states?
I think what they're asking for. I'm going to flip back in my slides here. I know you're not supposed to do that, but I'm going to. I think they were talking about how it rolls up into a number on here. And if you're on the CMDB dashboard, this is actually an active widget. So you can drill into this where it says, you have this percentage of recommended fields, or in this case where it has the audit. This is actually an active widget, so you would drill into this and you could see the specific audits that are failed. Drill into that and then break it down by class. If I were looking on the completeness report and drilling into that, the more detailed completeness report, I would automatically see that broken down into a bar chart by classes, and then I could even drill into that bar chart to the specific incidences within that class. So I hope that's
okay. Great. Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I would probably think that'll probably be it, because we're just running out of time, Scott. So, we'll leave the questions there, and we'll certainly, get to those questions and reach out to the folks that ask the questions individually, make sure we get them an answer. So thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. And certainly the explanations make sense to me. Let's catch up with the slide deck here and, get to the next slide where we were. And that's pretty much, the time for me to say that, if you found this webinar useful, I'd certainly like to draw your attention to the myriad of on-demand webinars we do, and ebooks and white papers, which is out in our library resource pages on our website. So you can certainly read more about, our best practices to staffing your ServiceNow team, as well as the tips and tips in upgrading the best practices for your CMDB and whatnot. So that's certainly a good resource to go into. And then I would certainly, like to thank you all for joining me today, and Scott for this webinar. We certainly enjoyed speaking to you all. If you would like additional information, please feel free to send us an email at servicenow@covestic.com. That concludes our session today, folks, and thank you again for attending. And remember to keep an eye out for the upcoming webinars, as well as the email here from the recording. And nothing else left other than to wish you a great day and the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Have a great day. And Caitlin in the background, you too.